Welcome to a new episode of Inside the Economist's Mind. Today we're diving deep into understanding inflation. More specifically, how it's measured right here in Australia.
That's right. We'll be, unpacking the details from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the ABS, looking at exactly how they measure inflation with a real focus on the Consumer Price Index, CPI, as most people call it.
Yeah, the CPI. And our mission today, really, is for you listening. We want to give you a clear, insightful picture of how inflation gets tracked, what that CPI number actually tells us, and maybe just as important, what it doesn't tell us.
Exactly. We'll pull out the key bits, the important nuggets, so you feel properly informed without, drowning in numbers.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. What actually is inflation?
Well, simply put, inflation is just an increase in the general price level, for the goods and services households typically buy. And it's measured as the rate of change of those prices over time.
The rate of change. So
Wow.
how fast prices are going up.
Precisely. Although it's worth remembering, prices can also fall. That's called deflation. But we usually talk about inflation.
Right. And in Australia, the main tool for tracking this is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. That's the big one we always hear about.
Absolutely. The CPI is definitely our most well-known inflation indicator. Think of it like this. It measures the percentage change in the price of a specific basket of goods and services.
A basket.
Yeah, a metaphorical basket representing what average Australian households consume.
Okay. And it sounds straightforward, but I guess getting that measurement right is complex.
Oh, very complex in practice, yeah.
And it's the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, they're the ones doing all this calculating.
That's correct. The ABS calculates it, and they publish the main CPI figure quarterly, every 3 months.
Oh, really?
Though more recently, actually since September 2022, they've started putting out a monthly CPI indicator as well.
Oh, right. Monthly sounds more useful, quicker.
Well, it gives a timelier read, definitely. It uses updated prices for about 2/3 of the CPI basket each month. But, and this is important, the quarterly CPI is still seen as the principal measure, the most comprehensive one.
Ah, I see. So the quarterly figure is still the benchmark that economists really focus on for the deep analysis.
That's generally the case, yes.
So this basket then, what actually goes into it? If it represents household spending, it must cover a lot of ground.
It really does. The ABS collects prices for literally thousands of individual items. It's huge. And to manage all that, they group these items into 87 categories. They call them expenditure classes.
87 categories.
Wow. And those are then rolled up further into 11 main groups.
11 main groups. Okay, can you give us a sense of what those are and how much weight they have?
Sure. So using the 2024 figures, the biggest chunk is housing. That's around 22% of the basket.
Okay, housing number one. Makes sense.
Then comes food and non-alcoholic beverages. That's about 17%.
Right.
Recreation and culture is pretty big too, 13%. Transport is 11%. Then you've got furnishings, household equipment and services at 8%, alcohol and tobacco at 7%, health at 6%.
Okay, quite a spread.
Insurance and financial services 5%, education 4%, clothing and footwear 3%, and communication is the smallest at about 2%.
And these are rounded figures, you said?
Yeah, roughly. So they might not add up exactly to 100, but that gives you the picture.
It really does paint a picture of where the average household dollar goes. But how do they decide the weights? How do they know housing is 22% and food is 17%?
Good question. It's based on detailed surveys of what Australian households actually spend their money on. The ABS collects data on household expenditure. If we, on average, spend more of our income on, say, rent or groceries, those things get a bigger weight in the CPI.
And how often do they update these weights? Spending habits change, right?
They do. Traditionally, they did major updates roughly every 5 years. But since late 2017, they've actually moved to updating the weights more frequently, annually, in fact.
Annually, that seems much better for keeping up.
It is. It helps keep the CPI basket more relevant and responsive to how people's spending patterns are shifting.
Like adding smartphones, you mentioned. That wouldn't have been in there decades ago.
Exactly. Smartphones are a perfect example. As they became essential, they were added, reflecting that shift in technology and spending. The basket has to evolve.
Okay, so they know what to track and how much it matters.
Right.
But the actual price collection, tracking thousands of items, seems like a massive job. Where does all that data come from?
It is a huge undertaking. They use a really diverse mix of sources. They get prices directly from retailers, supermarkets, department stores, increasingly from websites too.
Online shopping, yeah.
Plus data from government authorities, energy providers, real estate agents for rents. It's a wide net.
And are they checking these prices constantly? or does it vary?
It varies. For some things, like groceries from supermarkets, they can get scanner data almost daily.
Yeah.
Super detailed.
Wow, date.
Yeah. For other things, it might be monthly, quarterly, or even just once a year. All up, they collect something like 100,000 individual prices every single quarter.
100,000 prices.
Yeah.
Every quarter. That's staggering.
It really highlights the scale of the operation.
Okay, so that's how they build the main number, the headline CPI. But we often hear about underlying inflation too. What's that about?
Ah, yes. Underlying inflation. That's a really important concept for economists, and especially for the Reserve Bank. While the official inflation target uses the headline CPI figure, underlying measures try to filter out the noise.
Noise.
Yeah, they try to exclude items where prices jump around a lot for temporary reasons. It gives a better sense of the more persistent, ongoing inflation pressures in the economy.
Okay, so filtering out temporary blips to see the real trend,
Yeah.
what kind of temporary things cause big price swings?
Well, a classic example is weather events hitting food supplies. Remember Cyclone Larry back in 2006?
Oh, the banana prices. Yes, I remember that. They went through the roof.
Exactly. Banana prices shot up like 400% or something crazy. But it was temporary. That sort of thing can spike the headline CPI. Another example might be a big one-off change in government taxes, like when the GST was introduced in 2000. That pushed up a lot of prices at once.
Right, so things that aren't really about the general ongoing pressure on prices.
Precisely. Underlying measures tried to look past those events.
So how do they calculate this underlying figure then? What are the methods?
In Australia, the main ways are using what's called the trimmed mean and the weighted median.
Trimmed mean and weighted median. Okay.
The ABS also calculates a measure that simply excludes volatile items, specifically fruit, veggies, and fuel, because their prices bounce around a lot.
So a few different ways to try and get at that core inflation.
Yeah. The trimmed mean, for example, it basically looks at all the 87 spending categories, ranks them by how much their prices changed in the quarter,
Okay.
and then it lops off the ones with the biggest price increases and the biggest price falls at either end.
Trims them off.
Exactly, trims them. Then it calculates the average inflation for the remaining chunk in the middle, usually the middle 70%.
Ah, I see. And the weighted median.
That one finds the item right in the middle of the pack. If you line up all the items by their price change, weighted by how important they are in the basket, the weighted median is the inflation rate of the item at the 50th percentile, the one smack bang in the middle.
You gotcha. So different statistical ways to find that central tendency, avoiding the extremes.
That's the idea. And we've got a graph showing this, haven't we? Annual CPI versus the trimmed mean from 1988 to 2023.
Yes, and you can really see how sometimes they move together, but other times, especially during big shocks, the headline CPI jumps around much more than the trimmed mean.
It illustrates the point nicely. The underlying measure often gives a smoother, potentially more informative trend for policymakers.
Okay, this is really helpful. To make the calculation crystal clear, could we maybe walk through a really simple example, like that two-item basket you mentioned, books and childcare?
Sure, let's do that. Imagine in 2016, a book costs $20 and an hour of childcare is $30.
Okay, $20 and $30.
Then, a year later, in 2017, the book price goes up to $20.50 and childcare goes up to $31.41.
Right.
To get the inflation for each item, you just calculate the percentage change. For books, it's the 50-cent increase divided by the original $20.
Times 100, that's 2.5%.
Correct. And for childcare, it's the $1.41 increase divided by the original $30 times 100.
Which comes out to 4.7%.
Exactly. So childcare inflation is higher than book inflation in this example.
Okay, that's the individual items, but the overall inflation for the basket, that's where the weights come in, right? You said childcare was weighted more heavily.
Precisely. Let's say childcare is a much bigger part of this household's budget, so it gets a weight of 73% and books get the remaining 27%.
Okay, 73% and 27%.
To get the basket's inflation, you multiply each item's inflation rate by its weight and then add them up. So it's 0.73 times 4.7% plus 0.27 times 2.5%.
But weighting the higher childcare inflation more heavily.
And that gives you an overall annual inflation for this simple basket of 4.1%.
Ah, okay, so even though book inflation was only 2.5%, the higher childcare inflation pulls the average up significantly because it has a bigger weight.
You've got it. It really shows why understanding those weights is key to understanding the final CPI number.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, the CPI is clearly super important, but you mentioned it has limitations. It doesn't tell us everything. What are some of the key things we should keep in mind that the CPI doesn't measure or capture perfectly?
That's a really critical point. The CPI is powerful, but yeah, it's not perfect. First off, and this confuses people sometimes, the CPI measures the rate of change in prices, not the absolute price level.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, say the index for bread is 140 and the index for eggs is 180. That doesn't mean eggs cost more than bread in dollars. It just means the price of eggs has gone up more relative to the starting point, the base period, than the price of bread has.
Oh, okay. It's about the percentage increase, not the actual price tag comparison between items. That's a very important distinction.
It is. Another limitation is coverage. The CPI mainly tracks prices in the capital cities.
Right, you said where about 2/3 of households live.
Yeah. So it doesn't directly capture price changes in regional or rural areas, which could be different.
And it's an average too, right? My spending isn't the same as yours.
Exactly. The CPI uses average spending patterns. But if you don't own a car, for example, the weight given to transport costs in the CPI won't reflect your personal experience of inflation. Your mileage may vary, quite literally.
Huh, good point. So individual experiences can differ quite a bit from the headline number. What about changes in quality? That sounds tricky.
It's a huge challenge. The ABS tries to measure only pure price changes. They want to adjust for quality improvements.
Like if my new phone costs the same,
Okay.
but has a much better camera.
Precisely. Or if the packet of pasta shrinks but the price stays the same, that's effectively a price increase per gram. They try to account for that.
How do they do that?
They have various methods, but it often involves making estimates or assumptions about the value of that quality change. It's easier for some goods than others. For services like healthcare or education, valuing quality improvements is particularly difficult.
I can imagine. It's hard to put a dollar value on a better diagnosis or a more engaging lesson.
Exactly. So there's always a possibility that the CPI might slightly understate or overstate inflation because of these quality adjustments.
Okay, what else?
There's also something called substitution biases. Remember the weights?
Yeah, they're updated annually now, but not constantly.
Right. So in between updates, if the price of, say, lamb shoots up relative to beef, people will naturally tend to buy less lamb and more beef. They substitute.
Makes sense.
But because the CPI basket weights are fixed for that year, the index might still reflect the higher lamb price according to the old spending pattern. It might slightly overstate the true cost increase people are experiencing because it doesn't immediately capture that switch to the cheaper option.
Ah, so the annual updates help reduce this bias, but maybe don't eliminate it completely between updates.
That's the idea. It's a mitigation. Another related point is new products.
Like the smartphone example again.
Yeah. New goods and services aren't added to the basket instantly. They usually wait until they have a significant market share. This means the CPI might miss out on capturing the initial price decreases that often happen when new technologies become more mainstream and cheaper to produce.
Okay. And one final really important point you touched on. CPI isn't quite the same as cost of living.
Correct. They are related but not identical. The CPI measures the change in prices of a fixed basket of goods and services. Cost of living tries to measure the change in spending needed to maintain a particular standard of living. It's a broader concept that might account for substitutions, changes in preferences, government benefits, and other things beyond just price changes.
So the ABS publishes other things for cost of living specifically.
Yes, they have other indices designed for that purpose. It's important not to treat the CPI as the definitive measure of changes in overall living standards or affordability.
Okay, so summing up, CPI is vital. It's comprehensive for tracking price changes in that representative basket. But we need to understand its specific focus and its limitations.
Absolutely. It tells a crucial part of the economic story, but not the whole story.
Right, so just to recap for everyone listening, we've dug into how the CPI, Australia's main inflation measure, works. It tracks price changes for a weighted basket representing household spending.
A basket that gets updated and price data collected quarterly from loads of sources.
We talked about the difference between that headline CPI and the underlying measures like the trimmed mean, which try to show the core trend by filtering out temporary spikes.
Like those banana prices.
Exactly. And we saw how the weights in the basket are crucial for the final calculation.
And importantly, we discussed the limitations. It tracks price change, not level. It's based on capital city averages. Quality changes are tricky. Substitution isn't captured instantly.
and it's not a perfect measure of the cost of living.
Yeah.
But hopefully you now have a much deeper grasp of this key economic number and what it really means.
Definitely. And thinking about those limitations may be a final thought for you to ponder. Given that the CPI focuses specifically on price changes, what other kinds of measures or indicators could we look at to get a perhaps more complete picture of economic well-being and how households are really faring?